Anthony, thank you again for joining me on the programme. I've mentioned the fact that the police have intervened, that a man has been arrested, but I really was very curious that an asylum seeker attack at this time seemed to be subject to something of a news blackout.
Well, I agree with you, Nigel. I think it is curious. And you mentioned the threat levels. I mean, on the whole, in the United Kingdom, we tend to raise threat levels after there's been a terrorist attack, not before. And why that is the case, I do not know. We're told the threat level is dictated by intelligence. So I think we can assume that there is no specific intelligence that the threat level is heightened at the moment. But that would seem to defy, common sense and what we're seeing going on in the world. And I would set that against what Sir Mark Rowley said just a few months ago. He said there were tens of thousands of Islamist terrorists in the United Kingdom. And he added, all they're waiting for is a spark. Meanwhile, in July, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, told us that there were 800 live investigations in the United Kingdom. There'd been almost 170 arrests, and 39 terror attacks have been foiled in the past 6 years. Now, you add that together and you say all this was before the Islamist Hamas attack on people in Israel, attacked ordinary civilians. They didn't dare take on the Israeli Defense Force. They were ordinary civilians attacked simply because they were Jews. Now, it seems to me to be common sense to believe that in that situation, we are in a highly explosive position in the United Kingdom with, as I said, tens of thousands waiting for a spark. Maybe what happened the Saturday before last in Israel is that spark. And yes, whatever the level is, we should be alert to that danger. We don't.
Yeah, I mean, look, as far as the Hartlepool incident's concerned, it is alleged he's been charged with murder. We'll have to let the courts decide what the truth is. But the clue is that the statement came from counter-terrorism. I mean, clearly, that is what the police thought the motivation must be. As I say, that's in the hands of the courts. Anthony Glees, if we do get attacks in this country, would it be fair to say that the government and our intelligence services and, in particular, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, who make these judgments as to what the grading are, I mean, they're going to be accused of being asleep at the wheel, aren't they?
Well, I think they would be if there were to be such an attack. And you're saying, Nigel, there may have been one. Well, we don't know, but it's possible. However, I think what's really important is that when we look at what Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has said, as very often, in my personal opinion with her thinking is right, but her language is wrong. And yes, there were people in London protesting against Israel, flying the Palestine flag, who, like you and me, I'm sure, did not want to see innocent people killed by a government that is really in Israel. As you're going to be talking to the Israeli ambassador. From our point of view, Netanyahu looks unhinged. I'm not surprised. He looks unhinged, not the man to lead an attack. However, there will have been people there flying that flag and attacking that chappie who had an Israeli flag, was rash enough to have an Israeli flag, and doing that to support Hamas. Now, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Again, as you point out, the BBC is rather anxious about making that clear, but it is a terrorist organization. People supporting Hamas are supporting terrorism, and we're also seeing on our campuses, I've been able to draw attention to that, lecturers and others involved in moulding impressionable young minds, glorifying the Hamas attack. Caged prisoners, caged as they're now called, who are very active on campus. They said it was the inalienable right of Hamas to carry out that butchery on Saturday. So where you've got this, and where you've got impressionable young minds who think that there's a great injustice here that they've got to right, got a situation of radicalization. Radicalization leads to extremism and terrorism. And we need to be on our watch. Whether we can do anything about it, are there enough cops? Are there enough people in MI5? Are there enough?
Well, I mean, there is
to lock them up. That's another matter.
I mean, there is, Anthony, an increased police presence already in parts of North London, and particularly at Wembley tonight, where, of course, England will be playing football against Italy in a qualifying game for the European Championships. But I would also point out to you, you mentioned Palestinian flags being carried on Saturday through the streets of London. There were other much stronger Islamist flags being flown as well. There was even a couple of women who had sellotape to the back of their jackets, images of paragliders, and yet the police didn't seem to want to intervene. Is it your view, Anthony Glees, that anti-Semitism is genuinely on the rise in our country?
Oh, I've no doubt about that. I've been discussing this with Lord Pickles, who, as you know, is charged with Britain's input into Holocaust memorial. People in our generation has done more to educate people about the Holocaust, I think, than ever been done before. And yet we still see people blaming the Jews left, right and centre. And yesterday I was listening to the Prime Minister's very stirring speech in Parliament, where he described that Saturday attack as a pogrom against the Jews. A well-chosen word by our Prime Minister, and it was a moving occasion. When I came out, I sent you a photograph if you want, there was a lady with a placard right in front of the gates where the Prime Minister's cars were about to come out, with a placard saying Israel is a terrorist state. She was all spattered with that. And the cops were looking at her. She was bonkers. She came at me when I tried to challenge her. She was bonkers. But that is the reality. You have bonkers people. You have mad people and bad people. And sometimes they're the same. And sometimes these people turn to terror. And that is what has got to be stopped in its tracks. And I think the people of this country really do want, I say, Suella's words were problematical, but her thinking is right. We do not want that in this country.
No, we don't.
Cannot afford
No.
it, and it needs to be challenged.
No, we don't. And Anthony Glees, thank you again for joining me.